Welcome to the Global Discussion, discussions with creatives, leaders and thinkers. My name's Simon Hodgkins. Today, I'm joined by Alison Alexander. You're very welcome to the podcast. Let's begin by asking you, Alison, to tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about the journey and this exciting world that you're involved in. So over to you, Alison.
Hello. Firstly, massive thank you for inviting me, Simon. I know we passed our paths crossed on Twitter a while ago, and so it's great to still be connected, and so really brilliant to be here. So it's always a bit like, where do you start? How do I introduce myself? So I'm kind of going to go backwards from now to where I've come from, because I think that's more relevant to how you started. So as you said, I'm Alison Alexander. I'm also known as A Metaverse A. Put that into any Google Drive and search and you will find me. And I am the co-founder at Metacampus, and I co-founded Metacampus with two other guys. We are a combination from Spain, Pere, Edu in Tasmania, and me in the UK. We are a truly international company, and we are a Web3 startup. And we started in January 22, and we started a Web3 education, transformation, and activation company. And we can come back to that stuff, but the main gist is, how do we help people go from living in the kind of Web 2 world, which we know now, even though we don't call it Web 2, to the new digitalized society? And we talk a lot about how do we help people unlock potential for the new digital society. And that's what we want to do. You want to know how to get there if you're an architect, or you want to know how to get there as a nurse, or you want to know how to get there as an accountant, or you want to know how to get there as any profession. We can help you think through what all this new world is, how to adjust your mindset, and then how to jump right in. So that's what we do. But how did I get here? And this is audio, so people might not be able to see that bit, that I am a 54-year-old woman. And I do say that because I think it's really important that people know you can jump into this world. I pivoted into Web3 from a 32-year career in local government in the UK. So I was the chief executive of a local council in the heart of Berkshire, and I was responsible for providing services to people. And I got to there from when I very first came into the people services when I was like 17. I was a child in care living in a children's home at that point, and I jumped into volunteering to be an advocate for children in care. And then from there, I went to be a youth worker, to how do we empower young people, me being a young person at that point. The government's philosophy in the UK was take people from the community to work in the community, to really empower them. And I did that, and I just went from there, and I just kept moving. And I stayed in public sector for, as I say, 32 years. And then I did decide to retire just after 50, that's a long old haul in that. So, and then I pivoted into virtual reality, and from there into the Web3.
So thanks for sharing that, Alison. And for people watching and listening to this episode, how did you get involved in this Web3, decentralized, metaverse? How did that all come about? Because it sounds very far removed from your prior career, if I can say that. So how did you get into it?
Well, the funny thing is, the first question I'm ever asked is, what the heck is like Web3? What the heck is an NFT? And then how the heck did you get from public sector into the Web3? So, okay, so how did I do it? When I left the public sector, somebody who was a founder asked me to join their company as a co-CEO, and it was a virtual reality company. And again, I'd never done virtual reality, but the reason they asked me was because I was a long-standing public servant. So I knew the public sector, and they wanted to introduce virtual reality into the public sector. So whether that be teachers, health, anywhere possible. So when I came in, I then took it into the Met, into hospitals, and the whole concept was, how do you help people walk in the footsteps in our perspective for children? How do I help somebody really understand how a child who has had a significant, difficult childhood, what's the ramifications of that when they're sitting in your classroom as a stroppy 15-year-old? How do you remember and give them a chance in life? Because we want you to first see that their experience could be loaded with other things. So how do we help people just empathize? And the amazing thing about virtual reality is it engages both your thinking and your feeling. And it's all those senses, which I know those kind of learning styles. It doesn't matter what kind of learning style you have. The minute you go into virtual reality, it engages all of them. And so we've all got a kind of primary learning style and then a secondary, but this engages all of them. And I think what virtual reality shows us is learning through virtual reality, you learn kind of 4 times faster. And most importantly, you retain it and you are more confident to apply it to your practice. So I did that, and Pere, who made the beautiful films with us, he asked me if I would join him on a venture to set up a Web3. Actually, he sent me a couple of articles around how the Web3 was enabling the unbanked become banked, how it could help change the economics of the world, how it could, by using the metaverse, you can remove unconscious bias, and you could really give people who have had been disaffected and disadvantaged a greater start in life. And so the minute I read them, I was like, I'm in. Let's do this.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Alison. That makes a lot more sense now, because I was struggling to see how you got from there to here. And the world of VR, and I suppose AR and VR to some degree, I remember wearing Google Glass with pride, thinking I was the coolest thing. And that lasted for about a week until the whole privacy thing kicked in and people then stopped wearing them, and it didn't really kind of pan out the way it was. But shoot forward quite a number of years, and the virtual reality world certainly has, both from a technology and a headset perspective and from an education perspective, there's an awful lot of companies now really doing some wonderful things when it comes to education. We see it in business from a conference perspective, don't we? And from sharing of information. And the technology does seem to be catching up. Of course, the big one, Meta, Mark Zuckerberg and his team decided to pretty much bet the farm on it. And I'm not sure how that's going, but I know they're rapidly scrambling now with this AI world as well. So tell us a little bit about VR then. Tell us a little bit more about what are some of the advantages that you're seeing? Because you threw a stat out there about how much better it is for learning, and I hadn't heard that stat before. So could you maybe just unpack that a little bit for me? Yeah,
no, definitely. And I think with VR, for us, we used it very much to take people on a learning journey. And what we found, and it's not just what we've found, it's what the Big Four have found when they've done research, and they're all now very clear that if you learn in a VR experience from the traditional classroom experience, you are absolutely going to learn 4 times faster. And it is because actually you're a captive audience, aren't you? You can no longer be distracted by what might happen on your phone or on your computer, or what did I just see out the window? Actually, you are absolutely in there. And I think what happens, or for me, it heightens all my senses. You're looking around, like you are absolutely focused. And because of that, and because of it really engaging, I'm going to say that thinking process, but also your emotions, it really makes you go get a grips with it more. So we were trying to teach people, how do they help and understand young people more? And what we found was that teachers absolutely reported responding differently to children once they went through that experience. It had that aha moment for them. The same with police. We did it with the police. How do you take a frontline police officer into that world of a child who's living in a domestic abuse environment so that when they first turn up at that house and knock on the door, they actually take more decisive action because they know the long-term consequence. If they walk away, what happens on trip 2 or trip 3 or trip 4? What's already been done? So it's faster learning and much more impactful. And that's why I think lots of people are now saying, let's dive into the metaverse and let's take a trip around a metaverse. Let's hold classes. I did a whole course where they kept taking us into the metaverse. And actually, just also to clarify, there isn't one metaverse. There are lots of metaverses before anyone is saying, who is it? Whether it's Decentraland, Sandbox, these are the more decentralized ones. And like on cyber, I went to a New Year's Eve party on cyber, which was literally lots of people on a rooftop having a party. But it is a really powerful experience. You go there, and maybe it's that uniqueness at the moment, and it won't be like that in 10 years' time when our young people are doing it. But I kind of am blown away by it. Oh my God, I'm here with people from around the world.
Yeah. And thanks for sharing that, Alison, because it's great insight. And I think that captive audience term that you used is really interesting, because I talk to a lot of people that write books or are publishers. And the thing about picking up a physical book is it's that immersiveness. You can't really do anything else when you're reading a physical book. You can listen to an audio book and do something else, but when you're reading a physical book, it's very hard to concentrate on anything else. Or being at the cinema, I suppose you could eat popcorn, but you're pretty much watching the big screen. And with the metaverse, it is that sort of captiveness, isn't it? It's the fact that you're fully focused on it. And that's a really insightful piece. So let's move it on a little bit. Let's talk a bit more about this metaverse, because there are quite a number of metaverses. We've got very famous celebrities around the world buying up real estate in the metaverse and hoping to become landlords and landladies. You're seeing people, advertising companies buying up billboards in the metaverse. You're seeing the commercialization around the edges, maybe, as well as education. But what does Metacampus do, just to bring it back to your own company? How do you, because I know there's an awful lot about onboarding somebody into that world. So could you maybe talk a little bit about that, Alison?
Yeah, no, definitely. So we have what we call a hub, a platform, which you can land in. And on that, it's not in the metaverse, so it's on your screen, on your computer. You would go into that. And there's a whole education component, because I very much believe education is about, like, you're gaining knowledge, you're acquiring new knowledge. And everything, whether we've used the word Decentraland, metaverse, I've used NFTs today, wallets, all of those, a whole new lingo, a whole new language that people need to learn. So we've got a whole section of how do you learn the lingo, who's key opinion leaders in this area, what's the kind of knowledge hub, where you can go and find anything you want. And then we have a whole series of kind of 3-minute podcasts, I'm going to say, but we've also used AI, because that's about the world people are going into. And sometimes the AI isn't perfect in terms of script and person, but we're doing that purposely to show people this is an evolving nature. Some are perfect and some aren't, but this is it. So you can read all of those, and the intention is, in the end, there'll be hundreds, but they're about anything that you can think of. What is crypto? Like, what is Discord? What is Telegram? What does Web3 mean? All of those. And they're really short. So as you said, you can walk around the street and listen to loads. You can go to bed listening to them. And then you have this section, and then we feel you kind of move from education to transformation. How do I take my new acquired knowledge and actually get my behaviors to be in line with that? So it's easy to learn, oh, there's a metaverse, but how do I actually go and visit a metaverse? So then we have a whole lot of transformation sessions. And we think, because we believe in having live sessions. So a bit like where we are now live in talking, we are bringing presenters to people, and they do keynotes or they do a panel. and actually you're there in the audience and you're able to engage. Now, that's on the platform, but sometimes our presenters say, let's go into Sandbox and we're going to take you on a tour. This week it was quite fun. We had like that first real venture in. The presenter, imagine being on a screen and trying to be directed how to get into Sandbox and go and meet the presenter. They went into Decentraland and then getting them to meet them at certain coordinates. Even I was like, oh my God, I've got to get there quickly. And so that's the way that really walks people in. And then we can handhold them around the metaverse, take them through that. So the idea is that through the education and the transformation, you really start to apply it into your everyday to-day practice so that you start to become fluent in having a wallet, using wallets, having several wallets actually, and actually being really comfortable with that stuff.
Do you think, this is just a quick side question, but do you think the generation coming through, or maybe the gamers, people that are heavily into gaming, do you think they are more open to this new Web 3.0, 3.5, whatever you want to call it, world that we're in today? Because I see a lot of parallels between people that immerse themselves in gaming and the metaverse. To a lot of people that I speak to that are very much into the gaming environment, they don't blink. It's just, of course, why wouldn't you? Because they're used to buying virtual skins or dances or weapons or, extra value-added services within gaming. And why wouldn't you just have this virtual world?
Exactly. And you've just again said a whole load of words that I'm going to say a lot of people listening to your podcast will be saying, what is a virtual skin? What's a weapon? Now, they might have young children, so they will know because their kids will hit them up for some money, but to buy tokens in the game. So that's again, so I think to answer your question simply, I think absolutely yes. I think that the generation Gen A, so those who are literally born and in schools at the moment, Gen Z, they are like at the end of it. My daughter is like at the end of her university. All of that era are a lot more comfortable with living in a digital society. I'm actually sure that they would describe themselves of this is their real persona, the one that they present in the digital world. Yeah. And they might use all those social platforms, and some of them have moved further into the gaming depending on what were their hobbies and what they grew up with. So I think that they are 2000% much more accustomed to it. I think the evidence base for that even more is that the metaverse is at least a $5 trillion industry at this point, and it has grown 64% in the last 3 years, that estimate, from what they expected it to be. The hike is phenomenal, and the people that are going in there, as you said, are, whether it's the pop, I'm going to say pop stars, that's really my age, isn't it? No one says pop stars anymore, but all those famous people, but also fashion and brands. They are the ones that are absolutely going in there. Like, I'm sure it was Nike who have reported earning more money from sales in the virtual world and secondary sales of their NFT than in real life. It is phenomenal, the change. And if you think their target audience are the younger generation, then that answers your question, that they are fundamentally there, and the big brands are already there investing. As you say, you go into the metaverse, or if you go into different ones, but you will go in and you will see the brands, the fashions, and the big fashion names like Gucci, all of those, they are in there massively. Yeah. But now we've got McDonald's. People keep being blown away by this. How is somebody going to buy a McDonald's in the metaverse? We're going to find out, because they are venturing into their Starbucks are already doing that as well. So they are all saying, we see this world, we're not really sure how it's going to impact us, but the most forward-thinking leaders are saying, we're going to go grab a bit of space there so that then we can evolve into it and be a part of building it, as opposed to waiting here to see what's happening and then have to enter it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I was actually going to mention Starbucks and Nike because I've seen a bit of a shift though, Alison. I'd be fascinated in your take on this between what used to be the NFT, right? This non-fungible token. And yet now big brands are starting to look at them more as collectibles. You know, they're kind of repositioning the terminology that's being used. And yeah, the sales that they're making in this virtual environment, it's staggering.
Yeah, it's definitely shifted. And in a sense, it's quite helpful. Like NFTs, if you hear the word NFT, I mean, when I first heard it, I want to say, like, I have a handbook here, the NFT handbook. I thought you were going to ask me about books. So I was like, oh no. And literally, as you said, I pivoted massively and I was just like, what is an NFT? A non-fungible. It took me ages to think, actually, an NFT is a house, isn't it? That's a non-fungible. It's not the same as the house next door. The two houses are non-fungible tokens. Yeah. So, but I think the more we move into language that everybody can easily understand, yeah, and I think people are now diving into digital assets or collectibles, yeah. And collectibles is a good one because, as we all know, every generation has had their collectibles, haven't they? Whether I'm going to say the marbles when I was a kid and we collected, but everyone has different collections, and so it's a much more acceptable word. The older generations understand why the kids are collecting because that's what they all do. So I think you're right. We're constantly evolving the language, and to ideally bring more and more people into that world.
Thank you, Alison. And I am going to ask you about your books in a moment, so don't worry. But I wanted to ask you something else. Just the last thing on the Metacampus piece, if I can, and then I'm going to change gear a little bit because, as well as being a co-founder of Metacampus, I know you're the chief operating officer, but you're also the director of ethics and social policy. So can we talk a little bit about ethics, because this whole world of AI, generative AI, metaverse, there is a real importance when it comes to ethics, isn't there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I think one of the beauties about being a team of three, that you are really different individuals, aren't you? And that's fundamentally what makes good teams. That you don't you don't appoint yourself, you appoint the opposite, because that's what you need. And our configuration is we have that real kind of business lead, business development, Pere. We have the real creative lead, Edu, and then myself, that social policy. And as I told you from the beginning, I've grown up from that whole social policy, like the whole focus of wanting to have a focus on disaffected, making sure we change the world, if I say it that way, because obviously we can all change the world, but really wanting to do that. And so for me, what was really important for us internally is that we said everything we do, we need to be really having a kind of mindset where we're looking at social. How can we impact? So whether it's us giving free licenses to people who are not in a world to be able to afford that, or to because one of the elements of Metacampus is that we do help Web3 startups, people who have gone through our program and go, oh, I have an idea and I want to start up. But one of the things is we will only partner with those who have a social focus. So one of them is called I Am On Chain, just to put that into perspective. I Am On Chain is all about Web3 domains called ENS. So earlier I said my name is A Metaverse A, but if I add .eth, it's the same as if I was ametaverse.com. Yep. So it's the Web3 version of that. So they have invested in 10,000 of these, and then they have partnered with the Mekong Club, which is a non-profit about eliminating modern day slavery. And they do this by encouraging people to buy a new domain, which is I am 0 to I am 10,000, on the whole concept of turning that kind of number around. I am positive. So I bought my daughter I am 2000.eth because that's the year she was born. But actually, people who are trapped in modern day slavery, often a number is a negative. And they are seeking to turn that around and to make money to be able to invest to eradicate modern day slavery. So we do that. And so my role is to make sure that we're constantly thinking of that. We're constantly thinking about saying to the world, as we grow this new Web3, have we got our eye on making sure this world is as accessible, inclusive, and safe as we possibly can be? And that's what you hear me say a lot. Accessibility, inclusion, and safety, the most important things.
Thank you, Alison. And yeah, you mentioned the Mekong Club, and I've actually interviewed Matt Friedman.
Oh, really?
Not on the global discussion, but actually as a long form article on the global interview. He did a written interview with us about the wonderful work that he's doing. He's the CEO and the founder of the Mekong Club. So it's amazing how the worlds come together. When you mentioned him, I went, I know that gentleman. Yeah,
that's cool. We're doing another Twitter space next week. If you are, send you an invite so you can come join us. We're doing one about the two together. Definitely.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying there about the social and the doing good, and it's a bit about doing no harm and taking the actions, isn't it? That doesn't harm or hurt another group of people, and showing concern and helping and supporting others. And it's that consistent care as well. So I suppose that's where your two careers collide, I suppose. You're probably best suited for that. But look, I do want to change gear a little bit because I could talk to you all day about this stuff, but I want to ask you some other questions.
Okay.
Now you held up a book a minute ago for the people watching, but I wanted to ask you about your learning style, about the books that you read, the authors that you like, the topics that interest you. And also, do you find yourself constantly scouring the web? Are you reading physical books? Are you listening to audiobooks? Are you just absolutely drained at the end of the day? You just need to put on Netflix and forget about it. How does it work for you, Alison?
Okay, so it's a bit of all of those, if I could say. Obviously, for those listening, I did know before that you might ask me about books, and that did freak me out a little bit, I have to say, because my learning style is by doing. Yeah, I'm a real doer, and that's how I learn. And I think because of my upbringing, I have to say, like growing up in an abusive family, then into foster care, children's home, actually book reading was never a thing. Do you know, some people, they just live in a space. It's the same as some people live in a space where they go to the theatre or they go to museums. I never, it just wasn't ever there. And when something's not there in the first 20 years of your life, it just doesn't, you have to kind of put yourself out to do that. Yeah. So that doesn't mean I don't read. Yeah. But I think I learn more by watching. So whether it's like watching the documentaries or whether it's reading podcasts I do love listening to now, and or YouTube. I think YouTube is brilliant, to be honest, about just watching and seeing it happen. Again, because sometimes they're really practical. So in terms of like what I would read, I mean, I think I'm much more into like fiction, non-fiction versus fiction. So I would read things that mainly are autobiographies. Yeah, Nelson Mandela, or like, I know they're older ones, but those kinds of things that really get you to think about Barack Obama, like just listening or being able to take from it about someone's life. Yeah. But also, I'm going to say like things as like The Colour Purple, that always comes to mind as a book. And Schindler, I say it as Schindler's List because it's the film, and Babe Schindler's Ark, the book. I mean, that to me is the most, like, just the most heart-wrenching film. I think everyone should watch that all the time. We should just keep reminding ourselves it's to do that. And one book that I do love that I think is a real great way of getting people to understand children and how things can go devastatingly wrong is the book Sleepers. And again, about like a group of 4 boys where life goes from being playful and taking pranks to destroying their lives. And I just think watching that unfold. So I love reading things like that, even though that was quite heartbreaking. I do love, they're the kinds of things I enjoy reading. When I came into this world, pivoted, it was a lot of podcasts I read. not read, listened to, and different ones. Yeah. So I think the most things that I would say to people too with that, you have to go and listen, because there's some that are really detailed, but some that are like, I often listen to a lot of female podcasts who are just interviewing people on a high level. Tell us about what you're doing and getting people to introduce it to you. Yeah. Holly Shannon, like Coffee with Shannon, I really like her. Like, she really helped me see a lot. Bankless Boys, they help me understand a lot. The Real Vision, they help me understand lots around the crypto world. I think I've gone through stages. When I first came in, I wanted to know all the terms. Then I moved into wanting to understand NFTs more. And then I moved into more understanding crypto more. So I think it's gone through different stages.
Yeah, no,
and I do love
like
Netflix,
that.
sorry. And I do love then, like, sometimes because the Web3 world is a 24/7, and I know every job is, yeah, but seriously, whenever like I'm asleep, Edu is writing to me, yeah, because he's in Tasmania, yeah, and it really is. And so sometimes you don't switch off till late, and then you're half on Twitter and half watching something, and that feels a bit like what my life is like.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can relate to that double screen Netflix
Yeah.
watching experience. Yeah, for sure. But you do need to escape a little bit. You do need to change gear a little bit. That's really, really true. And it sounds like you sort of lean very much to a visual way of learning, but you have a mix too, right? As we all do, I suppose.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that. And it's interesting that you mentioned Schindler's List as well, because we were talking about cinema and popcorn and immersive. And I know when Schindler's List came out in the cinema, they banned all food and drinks when it was shown. You couldn't get popcorn or drinks.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I didn't...
as a because it was such an important film that they insisted that popcorn and drinks were not served when people had to go in and actually just watch the film.
Oh,
And I think that was a really, I have never heard it done since, but I think that out of respect that cinemas banned, and the film producers for Schindler's List, they banned popcorn during the film. Yeah, and I just thought that was a very interesting move, back to
that shows I didn't see it at the cinema. I saw it. I remember literally, I watched it twice in one day. Yeah. I was just so like, oh my God. And I just watched it again. I just couldn't. It was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Speechless.
100%. Yeah. Well, look, the other question I want to ask you, because we've talked a little bit about your learning style, I want to sneak in a few more questions while we've got a bit of time here before we wrap up. So on your journey, your life journey, there must be people that you admire, people that have inspired you, or a particular personality or character trait that you resonate with. When I ask you that question, Alison, what springs to mind?
Okay, I'm going to say John springs to mind, Amy springs to mind, and I'll say a bit about those, but and quite a few young people spring to mind here for me. So when I was 17 and living in a kids' home, I worked for an organisation that used to kind of advocate for the rights of children in care. And this guy came over from Canada to find out how we did it, because he wanted to help young people in Canada to set it up. And then he asked us to go to Canada to help him do it. And then literally from then, and he's now my daughter's grandpa. Yeah. So, and literally I see him now, and he gave his life for young people. Yeah. And literally, I remember having so much, I just wanted him to be my dad. Or I just wanted him to be, because I didn't have any parents, and he was just everything. And when you are that age, you really do thrive, or like have a thirst, sorry, not thrive, have a thirst for kind of that attachment. And honestly, everything, he makes me mad because he's chaotic, he's all that, but literally his passion for helping disadvantaged people, he always comes to mind. Yeah, someone who's up there. And the fact that, like, my name is Alexander, I changed my name by Deepole, and that's his middle name. Yeah, so that's a kind of someone that's so important, really. And so he does. My niece Amy comes to mind too. Amy is obviously my sister's daughter, and she lives in a really working class environment, really difficult, and had kind of difficult, her parents were difficult for her because they'd had a traumatic life in that way. And I've watched her lift herself out. She came to live with me when she was 16. She was my daughter's nanny for the first few years. And I've watched her with that struggle. Her parents have been unemployed her whole life. Imagine that. She's 35 this year and her parents have never, ever worked. Yeah. And she has worked constantly since she was 16. And I watch her with that struggle all the time of, to a degree, she doesn't live in the world that I live in now, but she also doesn't live in the world that they live in. And I really see that kind of her falling through that space of, I don't know where I belong anymore. Yeah, I tried that one and that's hard to belong to, and I don't like that one anymore. And anyway, so she always, I admire her every day when she used to get up and walk past her parents who were still in bed, they were on the dole and she was going to work. Yeah, and she now is one of their carers. Yeah, so I kind of really hugely admire her for that, the amount of energy that takes. Yeah. Obviously, I have to say I admire my daughter, who's like doing her degree now, who has put up with me. And I do, yeah, she's put up with me doing a lot. I became a kind of, I think, a workaholic, I would probably have to say it. And that's where I found myself, really. So that's what I did. But yeah, they are two people, but there's so many people. Like I have, my daughter has another a granny who also, when I first come to public sector in Hampshire, I met her. And she opened her heart. She kind of let me in and let her in. And these are people, they don't have to, do they? They're not actually your real family. And I think, to me, that's about people caring about people and wanting to take care of them. So those people do. And I know that's not like really big names or people, but they're the kinds of people that you walk down the road and you see people and you see them help someone, and they're the people I admire. Yeah, the ones who do things out of their way and also are having to do it against all odds. All those kids in care who have literally had to suffer abuse, and then when they became teenagers, the system blamed them, and they have had to thrive, and they have all thrived, or many of them have thrived. And for me, they're the ones that I say they did it against all odds, and that's pretty impressive.
Alison, thank you so much for sharing that. I really, really appreciate you sharing that, and I think they are wonderful examples.
Thank you.
Thank you. I really do like that. The other thing I want to ask you, and it kind of leads on a little bit, I suppose, but it's a bit wider in terms of, I'm going to ask you a little bit about advice. Now, this might be advice that somebody has passed on to you that you hold dear, or it might be advice that you often find yourself sharing with others. But when I ask you about advice, again, what springs to mind for you?
Be authentic. That's the bit. Especially and in this new role, and in all my roles, yeah, I am a leader, and I have been, and I probably don't say that enough in that way of, I have led and therefore have been really responsible for helping people grow. And the one thing that I think I've always said is to bring you, to show up and bring you, and allow people to see that. And if they see that, even if you don't have something else, but what they wanted, they will still see you. And that is the right thing. And I say that a lot to people in the Web3 world who ask me, oh, how did you pivot? What should I do? And I always say to them, just be you. Yeah. Write how you would write, speak how you would speak. And that will take you to the places that you should be. And that's the thing.
Yeah. Love that. Absolutely love that, Alison. And look, here on the Global Discussion, we focus on authentic creatives, leaders and thinkers. So you're ticking all three boxes here. It's brilliant.
Thank you.
The other thing I want to ask you as well is I want to ask you about your planning process and how you think about the future, because you're in the future. You're working in this new world. And when you look at the next 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, how do you plan that? What are you hoping to achieve? What's on the horizon for Alison?
Yeah, I think there's several bits there. It's like in Metacampus, how do we plan? And I think one of the things I would want to say is that when you are in an evolving tech world, the problem is the tech is evolving at such pace. Just as you're about to do something comes in from left field, and it comes in so quickly that you then have to adapt. So an example is we have been growing our platform, getting that ready. And then as you do that, ChatGPT lands and everyone's like, right, it should be integrated in the platform. So that becomes really hard. I mean, you have to always say, where do you want to go? Pere and I was talking yesterday about, look, we need the 3-month curriculum plan that's there. Because if we've got that solidness, then you can interject things without really disrupting. It's when you don't have that plan that it becomes disruptive, because people are trying to kind of run to hold things stable. And then you say, no, I want you to do something different. So for me, I think in this world, 3-month education plan particularly is a good window. It's something solid. And then the world will have changed significantly in all we're working, that we would have had to adapt it. So that's how we don't do our education plan on a year basis. So I'm getting the team to always think about like 3 months, and then we'll adapt and grow, but that's it. But I think sometimes what I found with startups is you're just running for today. What do I have to do today and tomorrow? Yeah. So it's trying to introduce that. So what we're doing is delivering 3 months, but we also know that we have that 6 and 9 month plan. So in 6 months' time, we need to have added these additional 3 things. Or we know, so while now we know we want to do 40 live sessions a month, I know that by the end of the year, I promised to do 100 live sessions a month. So you can see that growth in the plan. So you need to have those numbers and keep coming back and checking them all the time to actually even get you started on a journey, don't you? So that's how I often see it. Or let's have an idea of where we want to get to. Let's chunk it down into quarters, and then let's move it a quarter at a time.
Yeah, and look, you've obviously got a busy year ahead, Alison, that's for sure. But I suppose the industry that you're in, or the area of work that you're in, it is moving really fast. I mean, it is light speed, and it's a little bit about. I often hear people talking about people that go on and do college degrees. You know, if they're fortunate enough to have the financial wherewithal, or the space, or the bandwidth, or the support to do a degree, that by the time they finish the degree, the landscape has changed significantly. So it's very smart to be looking at things in a 3-month window. Mm-hmm. And of course, there are many areas that you can learn in now, right? It isn't just college. It isn't just school. It isn't just university. And there's a great guy who I've spoken to on this show called Steve Pugh. He's actually a chartered engineer, and I've mentioned him a few times. He runs the Roadmap MBA. And he's got one of those big, audacious, hairy goals where he's trying to provide this MBA type education in a much smaller environment to 5 billion people who they're outside that loop. They don't have access to it, you know. And I kind of like that, you know. So I really appreciate what you're saying there. It really resonates with me.
And that's really important, isn't it? Actually, that's what it's all about. It's like whether it's trying to access the bankless and ensuring that they can participate economically. This is of everything that we are doing. This is about bringing greater equity to the world. This is what the decentralization of the internet as we know it is about.
So important, isn't it, Alison? Yeah. So
yeah.
Important. Well, look, as we come to the end of our time here, and I could talk to you for weeks on end, but I want to ask you just two last things. One is, if there's anything that I haven't mentioned, or if there's any other area that you're involved in that you'd just like to maybe shine a light on with our worldwide audience. And secondly, and importantly, if people want to find out more about all the great work that you're doing, or they want to get a little bit more involved maybe with Metacampus, where's the best place to send people to?
Okay, so I'm going to start with the last bit and then end with my first thoughts. Yeah, so the last one is like dead easy, as I say. You could look at me, Alison Alexander, on anything. If you just put that into a search, you'll find me on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Metacampus. So you'll find me, Pere Pérez, you'll find us that way, EduPal, you'll find us that way, or just metacampus.ai. Yeah, any of those, and you'll find all of us. So that's the way to do that. And then the thing is, it's about what I'd really might ask of everybody. Yeah, we're on a journey, and we're on a journey whether we are a founder, whether we're a builder, or whether we're a user. And for me, I think if every single person can go into that to say, how is what I'm building, growing, or contributing to being accessible? And what I mean by that is who's in the room with us? Who's in the room? Look around and notice. And make sure that you're bringing everyone in. And then when they're in, make sure that you're setting up your environment in a way that allows everyone to have that voice. Because it's no point being in if you don't feel that, if you remain voiceless. So we need to really focus on accessibility, on therefore inclusion once we get everyone in there. And then most importantly, as we've said, around safety. How do we keep everyone on this journey safely? People will often talk in the Web3 world of do your own research safely. This is about how do I be in the metaverse safely? How do I operate in this digital society safely? Those three things are what we should all be owning in our everyday today journey.
Like that a lot, Alison. So important. And that brings us nicely to the end of our time today here on the Global Discussion. So thank you to everybody who's been watching or listening to this episode around the world. Make sure that you like, follow, subscribe, do everything I need you to do to help support the podcast. And I hope that people join me back here for more discussions with creatives, leaders and thinkers. And all that remains for me to do is to thank you so much, Alison, for spending some time with me here today. It's been a fascinating discussion. Thank you so much.